no surprise, Buffalo pounded New England, and that fits the profile of what's happened for both teams this season. In addition to the Bills maintaining that offensive momentum, you know there's an agenda anytime the Bills have an opportunity to stick it to New England based on how dominant the Patriots have been over the last 15 years in that division. So it really did feel like more than just a single football game, even though it was very important for Buffalo as they're getting closer to locking up the 2 seed, understanding that Kansas City, although they are living dangerously and not playing with any urgency, has already clinched the top seed and the only bye in the AFC. Buffalo fans, and I'm not just playing to the room here, I know how important Bills Mafia is in this house, but if you are a Bills fan and you're trying to move beyond the passion connected to that organization, if you're just being objective, there's so many positives that you should be focused on moving forward as we're now just a Sunday away from the playoffs kicking off. And namely, it's Josh Allen. And you're never supposed to be wrong in this business. Maybe that's why I'm a fill-in guy. I'm not here 5 days a week. But there's a little thing called the tape. The tape don't lie. So if I told you last year, filling in for Jim, heading into the NFL postseason, that I had no faith in Josh Allen, I can't pretend like that didn't happen. I guess I could. A lot of guys build a career around that, but I think it's easier if you say what you mean and mean what you say. So I am surprised. And it's okay to be wrong. The goal is to be marginally entertaining, but I am borderline shocked that Josh Allen has progressed the way he has, because there was nothing in his body of work going back to his college days in Wyoming that would suggest he would become a more accurate passer in the pros. You just don't see it. And because in a former life, and that's why I'm looking forward to talking to Steve Weich, because I used to work at NFL Network. I used to do a daily NFL show. I've covered multiple combines. I don't have to read you my whole resume, but as a quote-unquote NFL guy, when you immerse yourself in the path to the draft, you build up a perception of a player. And you can't be a slave to that notion. And I'm pleased I was wrong, especially for Buffalo fans who've been suffering for eons, going back to Scott Norwood, that they have a franchise quarterback. And somebody who belongs in the MVP conversation, I'm not going to contradict myself this early in the program, was just yesterday I told you that Aaron Rodgers locked up the MVP with another brilliant performance on Sunday Night Football. I still believe that. Rodgers 1, Mahomes 2. Josh Allen should finish at least third in the MVP balloting. And I'm most impressed that it's not only his arm strength. We know, like Uncle Rico, he can throw it over a mountain. It's his efficiency. If you watched that game last night, and I was petering out around halftime, but I'm glad I stuck around for the third quarter because the offense came alive. You saw the continued evolution of Josh Allen. Yes, he can stretch the field and get the ball wherever it needs to go, but he has taken a big step forward in maturing as a decision maker and also making sure he's not forcing it into tight windows. And it's a huge asset to have a playmaker in Stephon Diggs on the business end of those touchdown throws. Allen with 4 touchdowns last night. Diggs scored 3 times. And as we think about where Buffalo is now, getting ready for the playoffs, the only issue I think moving forward that you should have a degree of concern about if you're a Bills fan, and I know this is way down the line, but if we think about what happens to successful teams, how about the Eagles? Well, Frank Reich did a tremendous job as a play caller in Philadelphia and now has been a very effective head coach in Indianapolis. But when he left the Eagles, I think you could draw a direct correlation to the beginning of this decline of Carson Wentz. Wentz has just not been the same, and I think a lot of that comes down to what's going on between his ears. There's a real nice rapport happening on the Buffalo Bills coaching staff. We'll talk about this with Pete Prisco coming up in about 10 minutes. I'm Brian Weber, in for Jim Rome. 1-800-636-8686. Emails, rome@haveatake.com. Twitter's your best bet, even if it is filled with venom. BW Weber, Weber with 2 Bs. But in addition to what we've seen on the defensive side of the football. Remember, the Bills had a profile that was very positive in recent years on defense. Slow start this year. They've come together, and I think their D coordinator, Leslie Frazier, should get some interviews. But Brian Daboll is a hot name that I think undeniably will get a job. Eric Bieniemy, long overdue in Kansas City, should have been hired last year. And we could talk about the undercurrents as to why that has not happened. And it's not just about Eric. It's about a real systemic issue in the NFL. But Daboll has a resume that anybody would be jealous of, connected to Belichick, and that can be a good thing. Look up Brian Flores, what he's done in Miami, compared to Charlie Weiss and Matt Patricia and the rest of the Flotsam and Jetsam from that coaching tree in New England. But Daboll's done, I think, a masterful job of covering up some of Allen's weaknesses, designing a scheme that is a little bit counterintuitive. You don't think about Buffalo going 5 wide and playing a Big 12 style of offense. And Allen's done the work. So I'm just wondering if Daboll leaves, what happens to Allen next year. That's next year. Hopefully I'm filling in for Jim during the holidays and we can talk about where Buffalo is in 2021. Let's take it one sentence at a time. But Allen, to his credit, has refined his skill set, and he has been dynamic, and there are no reasons to believe anything's going to change for Buffalo as they get closer to potentially a rematch against the Chiefs. Remember, these teams played in the regular season. Final score was 26-17 Kansas City. If you watch the game, it wasn't that close. Kansas City actually dictated the terms, but one of the key elements for KC in that game has been banged up lately. I think it's a major reason why the Chiefs have been less than dominant and candidly should have won fewer games than they have. When they beat the Bills, they leaned heavily on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or you can say Helaire, like the Monday Night Football crew. He's been banged up. And I think if we're looking at Kansas City and Buffalo again in the AFC title game, remember, a handful of fans allowed at Arrowhead Stadium, but it won't be a cauldron. It won't be 80,000 folks in full throat. I think Buffalo can hang with them. I think Buffalo is going to make it a very intriguing AFC title game if we get that far. And I'm not discounting the Ravens, who I think are going to be a very dangerous wild card because we know Pittsburgh woke up in the second half against Indy and won the division title. But quietly, Ravens have found their sync again. They're healthy. Remember, they had all those COVID issues. That's behind them. Yes, the Giants are representative of just how putrid the NFC East has been, but the Ravens ran wild over them on Sunday with roughly 250 rushing yards, and Lamar Jackson is motivated. He knows that now he's got to deliver in the postseason. Winning an MVP in the regular season is not enough. So I'm not crowning anybody right now, but the Bills have demonstrated repeatedly they are legit. And think about what else is going on in that division. Let's talk about the Patriots. Cam Newton's future, hard to discern. Go back to what happened this summer. Every other team passed on him, including Ron Rivera's former head coach, who could have used him potentially in Washington. I don't think Cam deserves any blame for what's happened this year. I think his body has just fallen apart. Is there a real chance that if he wants to play next season, he's going to have to settle for a backup role?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more along the lines of a backup role. Amazingly, he can't throw the football right now, which I don't get. I mean, you saw last night there were a couple opportunities to hit some passes in the middle of the field, and he skipped them. I don't know why. He just hasn't looked comfortable throwing it. He had that one game at Seattle early in the season when everybody thought, okay, Cam Newton's back to being Cam Newton, but he isn't. And maybe all the wear and tear on his body has taken a toll. Remember, he's had a bunch of injuries. He had the shoulder. And one thing about being hit in the NFL on a constant basis, I don't care how big you are, and he's the biggest of the big when it comes to the quarterbacks who run around. That's going to be a problem down the road. You have to be able to play the game inside the pocket, and you have to be able to move to throw, not move to run. And I think for much of his career, he moved to run, and that's a problem. So I think he's a backup next year. I don't think he's a starting quarterback.
Pete, how about the Patriots moving forward? They know Jared Stidham better than anybody else, and they could have made him the starter anytime they wanted to. We saw him get in garbage time last night. How do you think the Patriots address the quarterback position in the offseason?
Well, they got to fix it because I don't think the answer's on that roster. Will they explore Matt Stafford, maybe making that kind of move? They don't have a ton of money, so that's going to be a problem. Will they look into maybe, if there's a domino effect, let's just say the Jets are ready to move away from Sam Darnold, which now might not be the case, then maybe the 49ers take Sam Darnold because I think he'd be perfect in their offense, and they let Garoppolo go and he ends up in New England. So I think that could happen. If not, you got to find one, in the draft. And, it's a tough thing to do. You got lucky one time when you got a 6th-round quarterback who ended up being a Hall of Famer, and you can't count on that on a regular basis. So this draft, you look at it, Trevor Lawrence is going to Jacksonville. What do the Jets do at 2? Maybe they stay with Darnold. Maybe they don't. Was that where, you end up getting some of those other guys into the conversation, including Fields and Wilson and maybe Trey Lance down the road. But if you look at that group of quarterbacks, is New England going to have an opportunity to get one? That's the million-dollar question.